Ever imagine, like, your private messages ending up in court? And not just any court, the Supreme Court. Well, that's what's happening right now with Donald Trump's Twitter messages.
Yeah, and this is way bigger than just, some celebrity gossip. This case, it really gets at something fundamental about free speech and privacy in our digital world.
Right. Okay. So we've got Elon Musk, who owns X, or Twitter as it used to be called, and he's facing off against special counsel Jack Smith. Smith is investigating Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election, and he wants access to Trump's Twitter data.
Yeah, and we're talking everything. Direct messages, deleted tweets, the whole 9 yards. Smith thinks there's key evidence hidden in there.
But Musk is pushing back hard. He's saying that giving up a former president's private messages would violate executive privilege. It's totally unprecedented, right? I mean, the legal system has never dealt with executive privilege in social media before.
And get this, Twitter actually resisted the search warrant at first, and they got hit with a $350,000 fine for not complying. That shows you how badly Smith wants those messages.
Wow, that's serious. So it seems like this all boils down to a really basic question.
Huh.
Who owns your data? And do the rules change if you were once the president of the United States?
Exactly. It makes you wonder, how far does executive privilege go in a world of tweets and retweets? Is there a line, even online, that the government can't cross?
It's kind of like trying to put a square block into a round hole. How do these old school legal ideas even work in the world of social media?
Yeah, that's exactly what makes this so tricky. To get Musk's argument, we got to dig into what executive privilege actually is.
Okay, so it's basically like it protects certain things the president says, right, to keep those conversations private.
You got it.
Yeah.
The idea is, if a president can't talk openly and privately with their advisors, it could really mess up their ability to make the tough calls, for the good of the country.
Right, that makes sense. But how does that apply to Trump tweeting? It's not like we're talking about some secret memo here. These were public messages out there for everyone to see.
That's the government's whole point. They're saying Twitter's a third party, like a bystander, so they don't have any claim to executive privilege over what their users post, even if that user was the president. Plus, they got a warrant for this data. They're saying they had a probable cause to think there's evidence of a crime in those messages.
Probable cause sounds like lawyers speak to me. What's it actually mean here?
It basically means the investigators, they had enough evidence to convince a judge that it's reasonable to believe they'd find evidence of a crime in the data. And that's important. It's not like the government's just randomly going through everyone's accounts. There's a process, legal steps they got to take to see this kind of information.
So the government is basically saying, we're not just on a fishing expedition. We have a good reason to think that what Trump tweeted might be connected to a crime.
Precisely. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. It's like these two really important principles going head to head. The government needing to be transparent and accountable versus the right to privacy, even for someone who was president.
And it's bigger than just one former president, right?
Yeah.
This case could be a really big deal for anyone who uses social media.
Oh, absolutely. If they can get access to Trump's private messages this easily, what's stopping them from doing the same thing to journalists, activists, even everyday people?
Yeah, it's kind of creepy when you think about it. Like, Big Brother is watching everything you do online, trying to balance, like, national security and our own freedom is tough.
Yeah, and we got to think about what this could mean for free speech, too. Like, will people be too scared to speak their minds online if they think the government might be reading their messages? It's a real worry.
You mean like people being afraid to criticize the government or talk about controversial stuff because they're worried about getting in trouble?
Exactly. Like, imagine being a journalist working on some big story or an activist, organizing a protest. If you thought for a second that the government could be reading your private messages, you'd think twice about saying anything, right? And that's a real problem for free speech.
It's like this big, scary shadow hanging over everything we do online, makes you really think twice about every word you type. And social media is so important these days, especially for elections, that it makes you wonder what this means for, the future of democracy.
Absolutely. If people are afraid to disagree or speak up because they're worried about the government spying on them, that's not real freedom, is it?
So where do we go from here? It's like we're in completely uncharted waters. How do we take these old laws and make them work in this new digital age?
It's definitely a challenge. But, I think this whole thing really shows us that we need to have a serious conversation about all of this. We got to figure out how to protect our privacy and our right to free speech online, but also let law enforcement do what they need to do.
Because in the end, this isn't just about Trump and his tweets or Elon Musk fighting in court. It's about protecting the rights of everyone online.
You said it. And that's something to keep in mind. Every time you pull out your phone and start scrolling, what you post, what you share, even what you like, it all adds up, right? It creates this like digital trail. And as we're seeing with this case, sometimes those trails can lead to some pretty big consequences.
Makes you think, huh?
Hmm.
So that's all the time we have for today. But as you go about your day, think about this. How much is your privacy worth to you in this digital age? And what can we all do to make sure that our online lives stay truly ours? That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.